We're still waiting for Harry from Normandy. So what we'll do is give you a tip and a hint on food. Woohoo.
Mirador's food tip of the week: hot buttered toast. Have we forgotten how wonderful simple hot buttered toast can be? Ingredients simple: bread and butter. Hot buttered toast. Mirador's food tip of the week. Try it.
Oh, let me see where we are. It's come back to me, I think. Yes, just making sure that we haven't got another technical hitch, of which there are many at this level of broadcast television. Let's see. Well, not quite sure what I've got there. It's not me. Oh, it is. Right, just give me a moment while I fiddle and fart around. All right, so we sent off a link to Harry again in case the first one didn't arrive. It's we're getting an echo. So now, how are we? Um, Now, how are we? Now, having it starts to. Is and now no no yes now it's working. No, it's not. It's not. Oh, how's that? Yes, that seems to have fixed it. Thank goodness. Well, never mind. I seem to be on my own for a little while. Um, just make sure that shall we? No, I'm on my own. This sometimes happens, and I have to be available with the gift of the gab. Let's see. I did actually want to return, sad though it is, to this morning's front pages, all of which is about the massacre in Gaza. And the mail outlines the dreadful massacre that has taken place on Gaza. And I started today's broadcast by saying that the thing that bothers me so much is there's so much hate around. How the hell do we all get to hate one another so much? And really, it starts at home in many ways, because there's so many people that hate the Tories, hate Labour, hate this, hate that. Hate does start at home, and then it's so vicious it permeates, and eventually gets to people who are not particular about how they display their hate, not in a nice civilized way, but in a vicious way, and a way that it creates all sorts of havoc. The inside pages of the newspaper this morning, it shows some harrowing photographs of people being shot in their own backyards, of people being abducted from a musical event where everyone was having a good time, of young girls fleeing in terror, in men waving guns, of the world's leaders saying what they feel. And there is now a fear of all-out war because Hamas is always considered to be the unofficial but accepted militant arm, if you want to put it that way, to the Iranian government. And the response from Britain and from the United States and from others is that we must help Israel in reacting to this. And I suppose one can accept that it is the right and proper thing to do. But for those people who actually see the other side of things, I suppose it's they would prefer not to see this support transpire. Dragged to a music festival on a motorbike, kidnapped with babies and their grandparents, Mum missing but children found. Boy of 10 snatched at gunpoint from his home. The mothers who had vanished without a trace. Gunmen stormed in and then silence, says one witness. These are all personal stories, and that's what really this hatred between nations boils down to: personal stories of loss and death and destruction. Crackdown on parades. Police chiefs are drawing up plans to prevent convoys of pro-Palestinian activists parading through Jewish communities in Britain. Home Secretary Suella Braverman yesterday urged officers to use the full force of the law after videos emerged of people appearing to celebrate attacks on Israel. The Metropolitan Police increased patrols in London after Countdown presenter Rachel Riley reported seeing 2 cars with Palestinian flags flying from each window, seemingly celebrating like they were having a party. She later posted a video which showed people waving Palestinian flags, beeping car horns, and clasping "In Action West London." Mrs. Braverman posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, "There must be zero tolerance for anti-Semitism or glorification of terrorism on the streets of Britain." Iran is the power behind Hamas, yet the West still tries to treat it as a normal state. That's from experts who understand affairs in the Middle East and what drives them much better than any of us do. The Daily Mail's Woke Watch. Universities funding fake breasts and chest binders for transgender students. Okay. A warning from the Free Speech Czar. Academics and students risk being silenced at university. A higher education watchdog will warn today. So there are lots of things that are going on there. But I think that what we're going to have to do is to resort to some of our archive material while I'm trying to sort out whether it's a technical hitch or whether Harry's got the time wrong or he's ill or whatever. Perhaps what we'll do is from time to time we try to boost New Haven. So it's only 3 or 4 minutes. Let's just watch that just for a moment or two. well, there we are. We better go back and get rid of the blank screen, hadn't we? Yes, we had. Okay, I'm just seeing if we got something else that we can watch while we're waiting to sort this one out. And yeah. Well, how about one of my tall tales? Why not? I'm a very accomplished flyer now, but way back in the 60s, when commercial jets still were being tested on commercial flights, then getting on board an aircraft was something of a trauma. We sat there hoping like hell that the pilot knew what he was doing and that he would get us down at the other end. And of course the pilots didn't know what they were doing, and they did get us down at the other end. But then again, air crashes became front page news, and it seemed always there was a crash just before I was supposed to fly. And so I wasn't the best flyer. Then one morning, somebody at the station, radio station I was working at, said, "Oh, someone's got to go up in a light aircraft and do traffic reports." Ha ha ha, I said, "They're not getting me into that." Guess who they came knocking on the door to? Hayes, you go out, you do the traffic reports. Well, I had no choice. I couldn't say no, I had to do it. So indeed I did. And away I went each morning, getting up at about 4:30, driving out to the airport and getting there about 5 o'clock, marching over to the far side of the airfield and getting into a Cessna 172, taking off, soaring above the city and passing on information about what was happening in the traffic. Wow. Took me 2 or 3 days to get used to the fact that this is what I was going to do twice a day. But then eventually I began to calm down and began to quite enjoy it. I enjoyed it so much, in fact, that I fell asleep one morning. I dozed, and the pilot said, "I think your station is calling you." And I heard the magic words, and now we're going up above the city, above the traffic, to see what was happening on the roads. So I opened my eyes, looked down, and immediately began to give a report. And the report was that there was a big jam of buses near the Oak Street Bridge, which went over the Fraser River. Wow! what a report. And then as we turned the aircraft and flew away, I realized that this was the bus terminal. I had just said that there were traffic jams of buses, and I'd been looking down at where the buses congregated before they set out on their morning routes. It's nothing like a great report. The pilot turned to me and he said, "You know, you've got this job licked. It's a bit boring, isn't it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it is really. No, I mean, not much to say other than what's going on in the traffic. I try to brighten it up a little bit with a little quip here and there, but..." Right, tomorrow morning he said, "You get in the left-hand seat and I'll teach you to fly." And he did. And I was fortunate to have almost a year and a half of a flying experience. I logged 400 hours on the Cessna. I logged a couple of hours on a twin-engine aircraft and a couple of hours on other aircraft. I was the luckiest man in the world. And he put me into some pretty awful conditions. And we would fly up, I would give a report, and then we would do some what I know touch and goes. In other words, you land, you circle, you land, you circle, just to get some practice in. And we did, and one morning a gust of wind took it, and I thought that the wing was going to be ripped off. Well,
He grabbed the stick and managed to get us out of trouble, but it just shows the sort of thing that if you're going to be a professional pilot, that you have to put up with. So confident did we become on flying around together that he would set little tests, and he would say, there are clouds on the North Shore over the mountains. Why don't we go over and see if we can break the wings of this aircraft? Yes, let's do that. And we would deliberately fly into this mucky weather and get churned around and watch the wings, knowing full well that they wouldn't fall off. But daring. And it did turn out to be a lot of fun. I have to say, it turned out to be a lot of fun. A couple of other incidents. I used to take VIPs up in the afternoon and say, okay, here are some pollution issues and so on and so forth. And one afternoon we got my good friend, but also a colleague, Mrs. Grace McCarthy, who was the Deputy Prime Minister at the time. And we got out onto the runway and away we went. And a jet had taken off just before us, and it was a fairly still evening, so you can't see them, but the whirls of air caused by the jet's wings are still there. And sure enough, we got 3 or 4 feet from the ground, and away it went. We damn near lost the cabinet minister, but the Deputy Prime Minister. Once again, he came to the rescue, flipped it over, and we managed to save the day. The other item that I think was worth reporting is that we flew backwards. Have you ever flown backwards, he said. And this young chap was about 21 or 22. He was a nice young fellow. We bought him a helmet and nicknamed him the Red Baron. And he was to die in tragic circumstances in a plane crash later on. But he was a nice young man and very helpful and lots of fun. And so we went, and he said, we need a marker. And the plane travels forward at about 100 miles or so an hour. Actually, it's a little over 72 miles for the takeoff speed. And he said that the wind this morning is particularly strong. So he put the nose of the aircraft into the strong wind, and we watched the bridge below. And although we were keeping airspeed, the plane started to travel backwards. So here we were in reverse, in a plane, in the sky, watching the bridge recede while the plane powered forward at the correct speed and the wind pushed us back. And that's the sort of nonsense that we would get up to. And there are lots of other stories I could tell you about my flying experience, but perhaps this last one will bring something of a smile to your lips. I was trying very hard to impress who later became my wife, my girlfriend at the time, Valerie, and I said, would you like to come flying, dear, and come out with me this afternoon, and we can go and we'll go and do some traffic reports, but we'll also take a look at the Vancouver from the air. How lovely. Yes, she said, that'd be super. Anyway, we got settled into the plane, I taxied out, checked with the tower, yes, we were all okay, we were about to take off, there's nothing in our way, rolled it out onto the runway and roared down the runway ready to take off, and the tower came on and said, MLA, which is the call letters of the aircraft, you're going down the runway the wrong way. Oh my goodness me. We had to screech to a halt and take off the right way. She still married me. Well, that's my flying experience. I suppose I should fly off now. Till the next story, the next tall tale. Tiddlywip.
Oh, yeah. There. Good morning. Jane is here.
No, she's not.
Yes, she's always a little shy, but she's the power behind the throne. She keeps me going, and yeah, isn't it funny how things start to crop up in your mind? Is it really Monday? I had to think twice because if it isn't, then I'm wasting my time waiting for Harry, and if it is, I'm just a little concerned that he'll be all right. That he is all right. Um, so there we are. Something seems to have gone wrong with Harry's email, so we'll send it again. That's what we will do. It looks as if it's a problem with the email this morning. Would you believe it? As if they could never do anything wrong. As if they could do anything wrong. There you are, Harry.
Well, I've been
we having some problems with email this morning.
no, I've been standing by since 11 o'clock, and I was in the studio with you.
I couldn't see you. You weren't coming up on here. So it looks as if perhaps we got a problem. Yeah. Anyway, here we are now.
Not to worry.
Yes. I played a little thing in between time while we were waiting to say a great British dish is hot buttered toast.
Right. Of course it is. Yes, particularly if you grew up during the war, except it wasn't butter, it was margarine.
Margarine, that's right.
It had the peculiar effect after the war. I couldn't faced the taste of butter for several years. I hankered after margarine. But anyway, that's another story, another
Yes.
time,
Well,
another
I
place.
think no, I think I said to you last week that for the longest time I thought the coffee was camp coffee with added milk.
Yes, yes. Well, there you go. No,
Right, Harry. We left you last week having caught a glimpse of your charming wife, and she is a live wire in the village, and we billing you now as Harry in France and other parts, because I've been billing you as a man who has visited many countries. You live now in Normandy, but you actually also remarkably, or perhaps not remarkably, impressively, whenever you talk about various places, you know a lot about the history. And one of the themes of our channel is history. Stand by each week that whenever you talk about a place you've been to, that we want to know a little bit of history of it.
yes, indeed. I mean, and of course, where I am now, Normandy, the history is quite remarkable and entwined, of course, with the history of Britain.
Absolutely.
And entwined very much so with the history of Lewis, where you are.
Indeed.
I think we talked before about de Varenne, or Warren, as he would be known in English parlance, who founded the castle at Lewis. I think he founded Lewis, did he not?
Well,
De Varenne.
Lewis was actually named or given the first charter by Alfred the Great in
Okay.
about 800, but not much is known about it. And in fact, with these new artificial intelligences, I actually put in a little quick questionnaire. Is what was the first pub in Lewis? And it came back and said, well, there's nothing documented, but this is probably what it would be like. So it was quite interesting that they did have pubs in those times, in pre-medieval times, Saxon times, but they don't know whether you went down and sort of knocked on the door and said, "Give me a pint," or what they were really terribly like,
Well,
except that travellers came.
there were inns, of course, and inns were a form of pub, and they had very strict rules and regulations, which technically still apply today, where you're supposed to give warmth and comfort and food to an itinerant traveler, there's old pub laws which are still on the statute book, which in Britain, which still apply. I don't know that anybody does apply them. They kick everybody out at 11 o'clock. But supposedly they're supposed to give warmth and sustenance and comforts to travelers. And that's going back to laws for innkeeping laws going back, I would think, even before the medieval period is 500 to 1500, so probably beginning of the medieval period.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit more, Harry, because I'm not familiar with those.
You're telling me you're not familiar with pubs, but
Oh,
in our youth,
I am, because I've always been in such a haze, forgive the pun, that I've never bothered to look at the statute.
Yes, well, no, quite. Yes, we weren't looking at the rules behind, just looking at the drink prices, I think.
That's right, nowadays.
But no, the British pub is an institution, and it's a matter of great regret to me personally, and to many of our compatriots, that the British pub, the traditional British pub, is en voie de disparition, as they say in French. It's disappearing slowly but surely. Many of them closing because of for economic reasons, for social reasons, drinking, driving, and all the rest of it, and so it's a little bit of a sad scene for the British pub. When I first became aware in adult life about the number of pubs in Britain, I think there are about 80 or 90,000, and I think it's shrunk by about a third now, which is a bad sign, because it's a distinctive part of British life, and unkind voices will say that, yes, you go there to drink, but in fact, you go there for conviviality. It's a meeting place. A pub
Yes.
is part of the fabric of the nation. And you've got the idyllic form illustrated in Midsummer Murders and other television programs. But basically, it's a place where people meet. And what's important about Britain, I feel, is that all the different classes of society meet. But having lived in many countries around the world and worked in even more, as you have indeed yourself, um, I come away with the conclusion that that Britain is the least class society that I've ever encountered, because
Yeah.
classes exist in all societies, and they're fully compartmentalized in most of the countries I've known. Depending on what social level you're at, if you live in Germany or France or for that matter Spain, you will never associate with a class above or below you. Whereas the English pub allowed the lawyer to talk to the postman, and the squire to come and have a drink with his gardener, and that sort of thing. I think it was a great social leveler, and so and that reflects my feeling about Britain. One sees it from top to bottom, from the royal family to the royal family seeks to be part of the nation's fabric, and I think very successfully, and
I
certainly.
agree with you, Harry. It's interesting. The place that you and I lived and worked together, at Vancouver, is across the water on Vancouver Island, where
Mm-hmm.
the provincial capital is. I once had a girlfriend when I first went to Canada, and she lived in a little place called Maple Bay. And
Yes.
it was astonishing because they lived as they thought an
Mm.
English village should live. And they were totally tiered and totally snobbish. And, there are those people that would go to the country club, and there are those people who would go fishing. And so on. And they did nothing. There was no integrated. It was only a tiny little village. It was not integrated at all. And they were totally intolerant of anybody coming in from the outside. I was amazed, absolutely amazed.
Well, I've witnessed the same thing in Canada, in Australia, different places where microcosms of local life have sought to perpetuate what they thought was the British tradition of class distinction, class snobbery, which had long been discarded in Britain. But
Yes, right.
they thought they should sustain or maintain that division in society, and it was rather amusing, really, and it was an anachronism. It perhaps something that existed long before you and I were born, but certainly in my lifetime, I've seen an enormous democratization of life in Britain. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, I don't feel in a town like Lewis. I mean, there are parts of it that they call secret Lewis, where judges and so on tend to live together in a section of the town. Sometimes you find in tiny little houses that we know more than sort of a living room and two bedrooms above, you'll find top lawyers living. Now it's almost the in thing to live in a tiny little cottage. But getting together in the sort of strata that these people seem to think we lived in, or indeed perhaps we did at one time, I have no idea, it is not present. You're absolutely right. Absolutely
Well,
right. Nothing at all.
houses, a big house, nice car, and all the rest of it used to be symbols of, well, success, I suppose, and status, in a class sense. But I think that's changed. I think
Oh,
people just seek to project a more modest, style of life, and they're beginning to prioritize what is truly of value. And instead of
absolutely.
having a beautiful big house with and sitting on orange boxes, and living in it with an overdraft at the bank, I think people have wised up a little bit since then.
I think you're absolutely right. Life has changed dramatically. I
Mhm.
mean, you'll see somebody of great wealth riding out on a bicycle. And I mean, nowadays, the car is pushed aside. Bicycle lanes are the in thing.
Well, indeed. But there are parts of the world, of course, where ostentatious behavior is, I mean, incredible place. I think there's much to admire about Dubai, but for instance, but you see such excesses where people have covered their cars in genuine gold, um, not plate, but some sort of a gold material, which is worth a fortune. I mean, worth more than the car. I mean, this is pushing things a little bit far, I think. Yeah.
Well, Harry, I'm fascinated by the time that you spent in South America, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd love you to expand on that a little bit. I mean, did you actually live on a ranch, or you're involved with a ranch?
No, I didn't. I didn't live there in the full sense of the word, but I was spending so much time there on assignment that I had to integrate completely into society. But it's such a huge subject, South America. Um, the starting point, I believe, is to explain that we tend to think of South America as one great amorphous mass, when in fact every country in South America is as different from the next as the European countries are. It's quite amazing. It's either because of its ethnic mix. We think of some countries as being quite Latin, when in fact they're entirely European. Argentina is massively European. And by contrast, we think of Mexico next to America, whereas population, I don't know what the population is now, but it's got to be under 60, 70 million. And there's only about 1 million people of direct European descent. There's a lot of native Mexicans and mestizos, as they call them, ones that are a mix between the two. And the same applies in many other countries in South America. Some have retained a very European aspect, and others are almost tribal. And so, big question or the big thing to remember is that they're quite different one from the other, and they all of them, except of course Brazil, being former Spanish colonies, Brazil being a Portuguese holding, they developed along certain ethnic lines, but with certainly distinct characteristics. That's the very first thing to remember about South America. So when you people like you or I go down there, we either identify with them or we're fascinated by them because they contrast so importantly with our the kind of person that we have evolved into.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the South American nation that you have been to, that is least European, that you found the most foreign, if you like.
Well, I would guess at Bolivia, perhaps, and was particularly fascinated with Bolivia. It's not a very, it's a country that's had a checkered history, named after Simon Bolivar, who was one of the great liberators, the two great liberators, San Martin for the south and Bolivar for the north of South America. And it's become a little bit of a rump state because it's got itself into alliances and wars, which lost it a large part of its territory. It used to have access to the sea at Antofagasta, but it made the mistake of going in on the side of Peru in the War of the Pacific against Chile, and lost that access. It's always trying to get it back. And then in the War of the Chaco, which was triggered by Standard Oil about oil rights in the desert between Bolivia and Paraguay and Brazil, and in the 30s, they lost about a third of their territory in that war. So it's constantly shrunk, and it now has become isolated. It's a landlocked nation. And it's developed its own characteristics, which are quite distinct from many of the other Latin American nations. but there are characteristics which I think are very interesting and to a degree tribal. They've gone politically, they've very much moved to the left at the moment, but they've had a long history. I think they've had at least a dictator for every year of their existence. And they've existed, I mean, it's quite, it's had about 176 revolutions or more, but an amazing country. And one which even within the part of it that's left of the original Bolivia varies so much. You've got the high central plateau, which borders Peru, Lake Titicaca, which is very high. Then in the middle, you go down to Cochabamba, where famous for the old tin mines and industrial activities. And then in the lower part, down towards the Paraguayan border, Santa Cruz, which is typical ranch country. So even within that small area, there's tremendous contrast. That's the big thing, I think, that I recall about South America: contrast. There's no homogeneity. Every little part of it is different from the next, and thoroughly fascinating. And the people, very warm, very friendly. Poverty almost triggers happiness in a curious way, because to escape their poverty, they're always having a festival or a feast or a party. Every weekend, it's the festival of something or other. And they haven't got 2 cents to rub together, some of these poor people. There's some very wealthy people, of course, in South America. There's a great division in society, unfortunately, but they constantly having parties, and their poverty almost becomes their wealth in their attitudinal behavior.
That's very interesting.
They don't sit there and be miserable. You don't find too many miserable South Americans. They're always having a party.
If I drove into the capital of Bolivia at the moment, and what is it?
I'm sorry, I missed that, Keith.
What was the capital of Bolivia?
The capital is La Paz.
La Paz.
La Paz is the administrative capital is Sucre, which that's actually the administrative capital. But the big city is La Paz, which is essentially the power base. Yeah.
Now, if I get off the train there at the moment, what would I expect? What would hit me in the eye as a visitor?
Well, if you got off the plane at La Paz at the airport, which is about 4,000 meters above sea level, first thing you'd do is you'd be out of breath. Because the air is very thin. There's very little oxygen in the air at that altitude. La Paz is a little bit lower at 3,500 meters above sea level. And there, if in the first couple of days, lying in your bed, you would be kept awake by the sound of your own heart beating, as it's adapted to the need for additional oxygen. You can take various pills and potions before you go, which eases this transition. It's not at all dangerous to your health. In fact, it's probably giving your heart a good bit of exercise to work a little bit harder, like jogging or something, to adapt to the shortage of oxygen at that height. But that's, as I say, up in the north end. That's La Paz, and so that's the first reaction you'd get. You'd probably want to take a trip out to what's called the Valley of the Moon, where you would think you're actually on the moon. There's a moonscape valley with it's totally contradicts the normal topography of the area, but a lovely spot, and everything is reasonably priced. It's or at least it was when I used to go to these places. Quite a lovely spot. So I'd recommend that if you want more traditional South American experience in Bolivia, you'd head south. You'd head down to Cochabamba and Santa Cruz, and you'd find what you see in Western movies, I guess. Cowboys, gauchos, and so another great comparison, I think, is to compare Argentina with Canada. They both got a very, very similar history and similar economic structure. They based on wheat, farming. Just like the prairies in Canada, you've got these vast areas of production of cereals in Argentina. And if you go to Buenos Aires, with the capital, it is so European. You would think you were in a European city. It's quite amazing, quite amazing.
So let's go back to Bolivia for a minute, because now you've exhausted me and I'm ready for lunch. What am I likely to find?
Well, first of all, they love meat. They love red meat, and and another interesting point about South America, we tend to think that if you buy meat and you should age it or something. No, they slaughter their meat and you eat it in the same day.
Wow.
The restaurants proudly proclaim that it was killed only this morning, so you're getting fresh beef. Um, I have to say that takes me back as for a second to Argentina, where in Calle Florida, the main drag of main street of Buenos Aires, or one of the main streets, fashionable streets. There's a steak restaurant called La Cabana, which you've never tasted meat in your life until you've eaten there. It's truly amazing. Yeah, and it's cooked actually in the window of the restaurant. People can stand outside and the saliva, as they're looking at the beef being cooked on charcoal grills. And go inside and you can eat it, and it's just an amazing experience. La Cabana, Calle Florida, Buenos Aires.
And what would you have with your steak?
Not a lot. You might get something that approaches chips, special potatoes, or pancake type potato accompaniment. Bread. They're very strong on bread. There's high consumption of bread in South America, just like there used to be in France. Though of course consumption of bread has gone through the floor in France. They used to eat. What was it? 2.5 baguettes per person in France before the war, and now it's barely half a baguette.
Really?
So bread still remains a very staple part of South American food. Yeah, less so in Europe. I find people have got the idea that eating bread is bad for you. I think it's what you put on it, which tends to be dangerous. But bread in itself is a very important staple, I would have thought. But I'm not a doctor. I'm not even a gourmet. I'm a gourmand. I like food. I like food in quantity and good. So,
what would I have to drink with it?
Sorry?
What would I have to drink with it?
Oh, wine, of course. The beer is very popular. They've got very good beer in South America, and but wine is the wines, particularly in Chile, Yonduraga Wine Factory down just south of Valparaiso is exceptional, and of course. Chilean wine, I think, has made a great inroad into the British market, and Argentinian wine from the Mendoza region and the foothills of the Andes. It's extremely good wine. Wine generally is giving France a real run for its money. The top French wines remain absolutely superb, but the average table wine it's now best bought, I think, in white wine, New Zealand, red wine, Australia, South Africa, and of course South America. Exceptionally good wines. Yeah.
I'm a great fan of Chilean wine, and an expert said to me that most Chilean grapes are grown at the foot of the Andes, and because it's a little colder, the skin is a little thicker, so it holds in the juices in the grape rather better than the average grape, and that's why Chilean wines are so tasty.
Well, that's a factor, of course, of both the Earth, but essentially the length of the season, the sunshine season. And if you get a longer season, the skin will harden on the grape. It'll get a little bit more baked, but the sugar content in the grape will increase quite significantly. And then the vinification process is enhanced because of that. And so you get a stronger wine very often, a slightly higher alcoholic content. Um, Average alcohol content in wine runs about 12%, and varies. You're going to get really strong wines in very hot countries like Algeria. You get Sidi Ibrahim in wine, and Arabic wine, and the red wine, exceptionally good, but you're going to get hammered on it pretty quickly, I'm afraid. Mm, mm,
good, good for those with only a few coppers in their purse.
mhm. Yes, but so no, wine though is we tend to think of beer as a refreshing drink, one that we drink and we drink socially, which takes us back to pubs in a way, and wine becomes something that you have with a meal. As opposed to drinking it, okay, a glass of rosé on the terrace in a nice summer afternoon is one thing, but essentially wine is accompaniment for a meal, I think, for most of us Brits. And the whereas there it is a standard drink. They would go to a wine bar, a wine and tapas bar, and drink wine the way we would drink beer in the pub.
Ah, that's interesting. We
Mm.
haven't quite picked up on that yet.
Oh no, I love wine, but in small quantities. I quite like beer in large quantities. Um, it's kept me going for 87 years, but it's still the old machine. Yeah.
Harry, during my time in Vancouver, I used to do an interview program each morning for one of the radio stations from Vancouver Airport. And I recall one morning that the Puma team, the Argentinian Pumas, came
Yes.
through. And that was way back in 1967 or 68,
Yes.
when
Yes.
they were on the scene, but not terribly well up on the international level. And now, of course, they're in the World Cup, and they did extremely well over the last couple of days.
They're doing very well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the feeling for Western sports, as it were, in South America?
Well, rugby is extremely popular. In Chile, Chile have been doing well, and
Yes,
not
they
in
have.
the same
Yeah.
dog. And Uruguay is still it's got a very strong rugby following. Uruguay, there's another little country, population, 3.5 million probably, and the capital Montevideo. They when you're driving in from the airport to Montevideo, you'd think you were in Kent. Little cottages, thatched roofs, and it's quite amazing. And in the capital, it's very European. The statue of General Artiga, who led one or two of the revolutions in the past, and occasionally, when there's an a political dispute, somebody blows him off his horse with dynamite, and the next people come along and put him back on. He's been removed on several occasions, but he stands in the main square and proudly proclaiming his nation's freedom and independence. So no, that's a lovely country, and rugby very popular there. Yeah, indeed. And they've not done too badly, but I mean the amazing. If we're talking rugby for a second, I know we're all over the block on these interviews, but if we're talking about rugby, what an amazing performance by Portugal. I played rugby.
Absolutely.
I played rugby in Portugal in the 1970s, and it was in its relative infancy. Rugby hit the Iberian Peninsula in 1922. It started in Spain, in Barcelona, when a veterinary student who had been studying at Toulouse University, came back home and taught the local people, Toulouse being a hotbed of rugby in France, he came back and taught the local people the game, and it began then. And of course, whether it spilled from there into Portugal, or whether the English influence in Portugal being England's oldest ally on the Atlantic coast, dating back to, gosh, I don't know, 800 and 900, I would think, AD. So maybe it did begin there earlier, but however, I'm amazed to see how, from a very simple beginning that I witnessed, and well, not a beginning, but a very simple level of rugby in the 1970s, they're able to field a team which yesterday beat Fiji. And Fiji, being one of the dark horses of this competition, may well go on to maybe not win, but give one or two of the big teams a scare. They've already beaten England, and and England will face them again, I believe, in the quarterfinals.
That's right.
And so that is going to be quite a remarkable feat. No, did I say Fiji? It was it was. Oh yes,
Fiji. Yep.
It was Fiji that Portugal beat, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yes, quite amazing feat, and very high quality game, I thought. Yeah. Have you got any money on any of the teams to win yourself?
I'm sad to say I think I'm going to go with the favourites. I think Ireland are going to take it. I watched them play South Africa in one of the pre-games, and I have to say I was very impressed by the Irish. Also, I've been immensely impressed by the coaching ability of Andy Farrell, who came from rugby league, but he's turned out to be a first-class rugby union coach, and I think England was silly not to keep him. But he's done a remarkable job with Ireland, I think.
There's no question about it. And of course, coming from rugby league, which is the principle of rugby league, is they like the ball to do the work and not the man. They have a passing game, which is the poetry of rugby, is when they pass the ball, not when they're just charging into each other, almost brutal with brute force. And so that's the style of play they've got. The coaches, I believe, in rugby have a tremendous influence. And I'm very unsure about the style of play that is being imposed on Britain, and the choice of players not for Britain, for England. They've got some dazzling players which they don't seem to be using.
I totally agree with you, and I don't understand it. And I think at long last the crowd at Twickenham, who can make all the difference to the performance of the national side, they're beginning to realise it as well. Whether the present coach is capable of shifting his mindset, I don't know. He's very successful, I think, with Leicester, but is he transferring that to the national team? It's difficult to say.
Well, it's the choice of players indicates the kind of game that he seeks to impose on the team, the style of play. And I won't be so unkind as to mention players by name, but none of them in the back line seems to provide any sort of spark. I was going to say George Ford. I'm not going to mention by name, but he just shows a little bit of spark. But can you imagine, is there anybody else that's showing any spark? Where are the Arnolds and the Marcus Smiths and some of these incredibly players, the type of player that we saw in the Portuguese team, fast, sharp, and throwing the ball about. It's just basic physical warfare with some of these teams, and the joy to see the All Blacks, who still remain my favourite, to win. I've got 10 euros riding on that.
Wow.
I'll have to get a bank loan if I lose. No, it's rugby at its best when the ball does the work and the men, the players are simply secondary to the passing, instead of all these
Yes.
blind people running into each other and destroying each other. I mean, I don't see that as really a good advert for rugby. It can be
No.
such a beautiful game when it flows nicely.
Yeah. I mean, one would hope that the spirit of rugby will come back into the England side. I mean, young Marcus Smith is quite dazzling when he gets going,
Of course
but
he is.
he's left out. He doesn't come on until
That's
the
exactly
60th
my point.
minute. Yeah.
Yeah. And and of course we've gone through several years of ignoring probably one of the best rugby players that England ever had, Danny Cipriani.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It just it blotted his copybook early on, and it probably got a little bit too big for his boots early on, but he was an absolute genius, and we've left him out. Hasn't was never chosen again after those
No,
very early days. And
uh,
there's scores of Danny Ciprianis and Marcus Smiths and I'm thinking Daly, if he's given a chance to move, is an exciting player. But they don't start him. They start some battering ram of a person
yeah.
who I shan't name, but got through the line the other day, and with guys on either side of him, never even thought of passing. So a very, very powerful player, and
Yes.
I won't
No,
mention his name.
I totally agree with you, and it does bother me. But do you remember Will Carling very
Yes.
unkindly said the old farts of the RFU,
Mhm.
and there is no question in my mind that there is a hierarchy that of people who go on into the administration of the game and who cling to that, and it's far more important being part of the hierarchy than it is feeding a successful England side. And perhaps I'm being unkind. No, I'm not being
Mhm.
unkind. I'm pretty sure that mentality pervades. And we're meeting teams from the third world countries where that sort of what should we say conservatism doesn't exist. They're young coaches. They like throwing the ball around, and it's starting to show in their international play.
Of course it is,
Yeah,
and speed is so important. When I look at the English team, um, where's the speed? Well, there's one or two of them that's got a fast, that are pretty good, but a lot of them are very slow. The big men very slow. That's going to impose a style of battering ram play, and it's not the
yeah,
kind of play that Ireland, that New Zealand, Portugal yesterday
yeah.
are playing. It's a totally different game they're playing. They're just going to run rings around them, I believe, if they once
Yeah.
they really master the art, and they're getting very close to it now.
I think it's a change is needed at the very top.
Yes, yeah. Want to get away from, dare I say it, as an X3 quarter, get away from the scrum mentality.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Because I was a
And
hybrid, I was a wing forward.
yes, yeah.
Yes,
I'm
until that famous game in Los Angeles, where by attrition it worked down to the only person left to put a standoff half was me because the others had been battered to death. and,
exactly.
and the
Yeah.
fear of suffering the same fate made me run
Mhm.
faster than I'd ever done before.
Yes. So California, it's a great experience for me. Used to go down over a number of years to the American Rugby Championships in Monterey, California. Played on the old polo grounds within the famous 17-mile drive. The uh, where Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Treasure Island, which is why all of the names in Treasure Island are to be found, Spyglass Hill and all the rest of it, golf courses that from Treasure Island. And there you saw these young American lads having difficulty to adapt to rugby, but playing an amazing game. It was almost a mix of basketball in a way. The way they were passing the ball about. It's just a joy to watch. And all incredibly fit and incredibly fast. If the Americans ever do take up rugby seriously, I think we're in for trouble. The only time, mind you, that it was in the Olympics, I believe in 1924, America won
Yes,
the gold in rugby. And I had the privilege of meeting an old man, a retired lawyer who had been on that team, and met him in the 70s. Lovely old guy. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I'm rambling on as usual.
No, Harry. This is what people enjoy about you: is you're drawing on your experience. I mean, what we don't realise sometimes, is, particularly in television, is that we say, "Oh, well, we'll bore people with that," or "we'll bore people with that," and they're the very things that they say. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And I've always based my television career on trying hard to say, let's answer, I didn't know that. So that's why I'm encouraging you to draw on your experiences, because actually, I mean, you've told me several things about South America that I didn't know. I mean, I wanted to come back. You just mentioned in passing the desert. I didn't know there was a desert in South America.
No. Well, great place. You got to make an effort. Go there.
I think my limbs won't carry me anymore, Harry. Sad though it be. I was asked if I would like to write a script for a documentary on some pyramids in Bosnia, because I spent about a year and a half living in Bosnia, and I hadn't realized that some of these hills were actually overgrown pyramids. So because I know a little bit about it, I had to regretfully decline, because nowadays I cannot crawl through little crevices to try and get into the heart of a rocky building. So I am fascinated by you passing on your experiences to places that I haven't been, and I hope that perhaps viewers sometimes are fascinated by the places that I've been that they haven't been. So this program is becoming a very vital part of Mirador's output. So don't, for God's sake, go away.
What I enjoy about this program is just the ease of just chatting about it. I suppose somebody watches and listens to all of our silly reminiscences, and throws half it away with a pinch of salt, as it were. But I enjoy it because it is simply like a conversation, just going back in old times. I think you and I are not about to run the New York Marathon anymore, and so it's what we have got is a wealth of anecdotal experience. It's fun.
The feedback is that they really enjoy you. Sure. So say don't go away. Now, before we do go, because we've actually been talking for quite a long time, one thing that I've asked you about is the festival in Dieppe for scallops. I remembered it this time. And can you just? I was in Dieppe. I went over for a weekend to get away from things, and I was fascinated by their Saturday morning market, which is very extensive. Can you tell me what happens at a scallop festival?
Well, first of all, you need to know that there's not just the Dieppe Scallop Festival. That's on the 18th and 19th of November. There are 7 major scallop festivals in Normandy. I've made a list of them here. I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to look at them. There's one at Ouistreham, which is the port, the ferry port for Caen. There's one at Villers-sur-Mer. That's in October. That's the 22nd, 29th of October. Port-en-Bessin is on the 11th and 12th of November. Dieppe, as I say, the 18th and 19th. Courcelles-sur-Mer on the 18th and 19th also of November. Grand-Combe-Messy, which is on the 25th and 26th of November. And Trouville-sur-Mer, which is on the 2nd and 3rd of December. So there's a whole series of these. The Dieppe one is very famous. It apparently attracts a good 100,000 people every year. So it's quite an amazing one. But I'm told that the fun one is Port-en-Bessin, which and I think we'll probably miss that because it's what date are we today? Oh gosh, it's starting on Wednesday, and it's this week.
Yes.
So there are some great scallop festivals that are coming up, but
Yes.
you're probably right in thinking of Dieppe. It's probably the most famous one.
Yes.
Now I've got to cite.
It's so easy to get to because New Haven is 5 miles from us, and the New Haven ferry used to sail right into Dieppe Harbour, but it now docks just about half a mile outside.
Sure, yeah. So it's very handy.
Ease of access, yes. But
Very
what does happen?
Mm-hmm. So it's very handy for you. I agree with that. But I've got to admit to a great disadvantage here. I'm not a great lover of seafood. I love fish, and all its forms. I love fish. But some of these strange-looking objects that look at me with great big googly eyes on the end of stalks and what have you, in my childhood, they're the kinds of things that haunted me in my crib, in my bed. And so I've never become a great lover of seafood. So I'm a very doubtful companion to try and interpret that for you. I do have, mind you, I've got a very good man who is an absolute expert in seafood that I could call upon if you were happy for me to have him come along.
Oh, absolutely! I'm happy for anybody, as I've said, to reflect your life, your friends, and your experiences. Bring anybody along. And actually, one of the things that I have always taken on board as a journalist is whenever you start looking at anything, start from a position of ignorance. I don't know nothing. And you ask questions along the way, and then you don't forget anything in telling the viewer. I remember the Jeremy Paxman, whom you may be familiar with, as a fairly famous interviewer here. I worked with him in Northern Ireland when he was just a young spud, and he came into a news meeting one day where we got a particularly fierce news editor, and he said, my God, he'll kill me. I've just interviewed somebody and I forgot to ask his name.
Yeah. I've got a guy who's a real expert, and he speaks English. And in fact, he went to university in Portsmouth or somewhere. Is that a university now? I guess it is. Is it?
Yeah, I think so. There is a Portsmouth University.
Yes. And
we'd be delighted to have him, and it would be interesting to talk to him. Yeah,
sure. Good show. Well, we'll try and get that sorted out for you, and that's. Let me just let me see. Dieppe. It's called the Herring and Scallop Festival. It's on the 18th and 19th of November. So we've got time to get ourselves organized for that.
Organized, absolutely.
Good man.
All right, Harry. Well, we'll say toodle pip for this week, and I hope that we will get your wife on eventually. She looks a charming lady, but I mean the fact that she's been so involved with you, she must have some very interesting memories.
She has a lot of memories, and I must persuade her to come on because when she's not beating me, she's got quite a good story to tell. And the other person, another young lady that I want to introduce you to, is the lady from the local tourist office here in
You
Domfront,
mentioned that, yes. Did you
who's a
mention it to her?
French girl. Her parents, both of them were English teachers. They met actually teaching English, studying English, I think, in England. And they got married and came back to France, had distinguished careers as teachers. And their little girl grew up to be fluent in English. So she is French. And she now is the guiding light at the local tourist office here. So if I can, she's been on vacation, so I'm hoping to be able to get her back, get her on to maybe next week if it's
Excellent.
possible to talk
Excellent.
to you, because she's got a lot to say about tourism in our little town, Domfront, of course, and I can throw in a few bits and pieces about tourism generally in France, which is having its ups and downs. France, of course, being the world's leading tourist destination in terms of the number of visitors that it welcomes per year, though it is an artificial figure because many of the people who come to France are on the way to somewhere else. They're going to Spain or Portugal or Italy or what have you. Though it is a tourist country, and roughly about 10% of its GNP is,
That's
is,
for tourism.
is from tourism. So it's quite a major
Yeah.
contribution. So there's an interesting story to tell about French tourism, and a particularly fascinating story about tourism in our little town, which is it's a lovely little spot and has a lot going for it. So this young lady, Marie-Laure Chausserie is her name, and I'm sure she would be able to give some good hints and good pointers to potential
Excellent.
British tourists.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah,
we've now got three potentials. You've got three potentials lined up already. So
great,
that's excellent. Yeah.
excellent.
All
Okay,
right,
well,
Harry, we'll see you at the same time next week.
try and pull that one off
Hopefully
for
with one or the other of your guests.
you. Okay, super.
Okay.
Okay, Keith, good to talk to you as
See you
always.
now.
Right, cheers now. Bye,
Bye,
bye.
Harry.
Bye.
Bye. Harry Atterton, France and other parts. As you can see, he has been around. Right, I think that's it for today. It's now 11:30, which means that we've gone long over our normal time. But we will we'll be back tomorrow morning at 8:30, at 8 o'clock rather, and we look forward to seeing you then. So here we go, saying goodbye until tomorrow. This is us.